Well, welcome to the podcast, Meg. And how are you doing today?
Amazing. This is my first podcast, so I'm nervous and excited, which
Yeah.
I think is how I want to feel most of the time about most of life, a little nervous and
I
a little
think-
excited.
Yeah, I think you always want that first time experience for every experience that you have.
Yeah.
It's also my first time recording a podcast live with somebody. So I am also, we're kind of experiencing this together. So it's all good. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to say yes, because you have so many different roles that you have been through, and now you are the executive director at Estée Lauder for the platform engineering team. And you have so many different things going on, but you still said yes to come to the podcast. So I really appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely. Anything
Yeah.
for cockroach.
Yes. So before we begin, tell me about, what is it that you're doing right now at Estee Lauder, what that role is all about, and what that function is.
Yeah, so at Estee Lauder, I am, like you said, the executive director of platform engineering. Platform engineering in our context is a bit sprawling, so
Right.
we have kind of everything needed to support the application.
Right.
So that is things like cloud infrastructure, all the way to global analytics, automated QA, the tools developers use. How I think about it is we serve the developer as our customer, and that's who we think about, and
Right.
we try to make their lives easier as much as we can.
Yeah. So it's like a broad function that you have to kind of be responsible for, right? And here's the funny thing. When I was traveling, I was telling my wife, hey, so I have to go for Roach Fest, which is our company event. And then I'm talking to Meg Adams from Estee Lauder, and my wife lost her mind because she's a big Estee Lauder fan. Because she gets her eyeliner from there. She has a bunch of other things, that she gets from there. So she's like, "Can we get free stuff from you?" I'm like,
God, I should have brought samples, and I'm embarrassed now that I didn't.
I was telling her I tried this trick with somebody I spoke from Chick-fil-A. His name is Brian Chambers, and we had a podcast, and I got some free Chick-fil-A sandwiches. So
God.
if you can hook me up, that will be the best thing. But again, Estee Lauder is one of the largest cosmetic brands in the world. Tell me a little bit about your own story as to how you got into tech. And I was reading stuff that you've written, and the story is amazing and beautiful. So I would rather have you tell that story to everyone listening as to how you got into this whole practice of tech and engineering and being a woman in code, actually.
My story started out like so many as an elementary special education teacher. I went to school for teaching and ultimately decided that that's not what I wanted to do. But I wasn't sure at that point. I just graduated college and was like, oh God, what have I done?
Yeah.
I have this degree and have no idea how to apply it. But what I did have going for me is that I'd been working part-time for one of the limited brand stores for several years.
Right.
So I called up Victoria's Secret and was like, will you please give me a job? So I was assistant managing a store for some time, and I found really quickly that I was able to bring a lot of the philosophy and the theory, the things I'd learned about human development and engaging the minds and spirits of people into the context of building and growing the team at Victoria's Secret.
Right.
And working in sales, you tie real dollar results
Right.
to that. Like, I had some of the most engaged teams, people who came back. We had very high retention, which is uncommon in retail. And we were selling a ton of stuff.
Right.
And I was really excited by that. I was like, this is the thing I want to do. This is fun,
Right.
but didn't want to work in sales forever. So I knew I wanted to be a leader and a manager, which is fairly uncommon, I think, for engineering leaders.
Yeah.
Usually people become engineers, and then eventually they either accidentally or sort of on purpose become a leader. But
Right.
I started out knowing that I wanted to lead teams and work in a leadership space.
Right.
And took some time to teach myself to code, and spent some years as an engineer, largely working in the front end space.
Right.
And then finally achieved the goal that I'd set out, which was to manage teams.
Yeah.
So started out, my first team was at Condé Nast, working largely in the front end space. And when I moved on from that job to Etsy, I'd interviewed for a role that was also kind of in the front-endy product space.
Right.
But through the course of the interview, they were like, you have a really strong management practice. We have this job over here in data
Right.
engineering we've been trying to hire for like a year,
Right.
and it's just not working. We can't find anyone with the skill set we need. Will you come try data engineering? And at the time, I was like, Was.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But I was really excited by the people I'd met and finally was like, okay, let's give this a try.
Got it.
So spent my time managing teams in the data engineering space
Right.
at Etsy. It was an absolute blast. Data is so interesting.
It is.
It's
It
my
is.
favorite of all the engineering spaces.
Right.
And I did that for almost a full 4 years. Towards the end of my tenure, I was invited to try a strategy and operations role. So rather than leading some of the data engineering teams, I was working on top of the engineering org, which had about 1,000 engineers.
Got it.
Thinking about engineering enablement, things like engineering onboarding, team acceleration, manager training. And I really liked doing that. I liked thinking about the problems, but I pretty quickly realized I missed working hands-on with leaders and with teams.
Right.
So made the move to Estée Lauder, where
Got it.
I now work with an amazing team of managers and senior staff engineers.
Got it. So how big is the team now at Estée that you're managing?
Oh, that's a good question. Right now, I want to say 50.
50 is not. It's not less. It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
To
Yeah.
manage, yeah. So do you think that having that experience of trying these, so having this versatile experience of being a developer, working on data, working on infrastructure, you have such a holistic profile now, and now you're a leader too. Do you think that gives you perspective to kind of look at a 50 people team who's working on different areas, and you can have a perspective, like a real perspective? Like I've met managers who are managers, but they don't have real experience on working on those problems. Do you think that helps you as you lead the team at Estée Lauder now?
I think it helps me in a lot of ways to pretty consistently be the person in the room that needs to seek clarity, needs to rely on my people to have expertise in the areas that they own, to push them to learn even more
Right.
about what they're working on and to learn it to a degree that they can teach it.
Got it.
So for me, it's been a superpower to consistently be entering into new spaces.
Got it.
And it's also a certain flavor of leader. I don't think all engineering leaders can be like purely broad.
Yeah. That makes sense, yeah.
But it's really useful
Yeah.
in some use cases.
I felt like you have a very holistic profile, and that's what it feels like you're bringing to Estée Lauder as a leader. And talking about Estée Lauder, I wanted to ask you is what, for somebody who's listening to this for the first time, right? Estée Lauder to a regular person is a cosmetic brand, right? And we know lots of people use these cosmetics. It's the second largest cosmetic brand behind L'Oreal, I believe. So what is technology at Estée Lauder like for people? What are you guys working on? Where does technology get applied, and what is it needed for? So
They are a holding company that owns many brands. So it's
Right.
not just Estée Lauder. They also own beauty brands like La Mer, Bobbi Brown, MAC Cosmetics, some things in the fragrance space like Tom Ford Beauty is a big player in fragrance, Jo Malone. And so how Estée kind of grew up in the tech space is that they were a marketing powerhouse. And so they started acquiring these brands or creating these brands and helping market them to a place of really great success. And this was happening as the web was kind of growing up and every company needed a website.
Right.
And so what happened is that there were these different brands, these different marketing teams that were like, we need a website and we need it now.
Right.
And so they started hiring engineers to build them websites.
Yeah.
And how that worked over the years, Estée has been wildly successful for quite some time. And it was okay to kind of be investing in engineering in all these different spaces, but it obviously created a pretty
Like a open culture where it's not critical or initially,
not critical, and nothing really needed to be unified. Everyone was kind of doing what they wanted to.
Right.
But at a certain point, for a lot of reasons, having a tech stack that's just sort of sprawling doesn't make a lot of sense,
Yeah.
especially when you're solving a lot of the same problems for
Yeah,
different brands.
100%.
And in e-commerce, there's only so many things we can do.
Right.
You click the thing, you buy the thing, you select the
Card
size.
and checkout is the bread and butter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so as I started talking to Estée, the journey that they have been on is consolidating all of that into a single tenant-based application where they build the components and then are able to share them with all of the brands that can modify them to the look and feel, the things that they want. And then we have more engineering resources to build cooler stuff, to think more about AI and things like that.
Interesting. So basically what your team right now is working on is creating this unified platform experience that then sub-teams within Estee can say, okay, we need this. Can you pull this out for us? Can you pull that out for us? You can do that. So how has that changed? Like coming in from some outside, bringing in this perspective, how I know your favorite word in engineering is change management.
It is, yeah.
Per your article.
Read the article.
Yes, I read the article. So how was change management like when you were coming in and talking to Estee Lauder about, okay, hey, this is what we need to do. This is where everybody is going. So how did the transition start?
Okay, beautiful question. I'll clarify that I have come in at the middle of this transition.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's actually what made the job really interesting to me, is I care a lot about change management, about managing culture and managing humans through change. And so the digital transformation the company was in the middle of, I was like, this looks like something I want to sink my fingers into. So what I have been working on there is really espousing engineering best practices, again, because we were coming from a space where there was more distributed engineering resources and not a centralized engineering organization. There's not necessarily that rich history of people who are advocating for or implementing really strong tooling around things like observability or testing. And that's not to say that there haven't been people who've been doing a lot of good thinking there over the years, but there's just hasn't been as much investment in it. And now we're very, very focused on ensuring with this new singular platform that the uptime is everything that we want it to be, that the performance is what we want it to be. Right. So we're really focused on advocating for and implementing some of those engineering best practices.
Got it. So when you were coming in, talk about in terms of where they were, what were they doing? Were they adopting the cloud? Were they already on the cloud, like AWS? Like if I ask you what cloud they prefer, is it a multi-cloud strategy or is it like let's be on one cloud or on-prem? How is that?
We have a multi-cloud strategy as an organization, but for the e-commerce website specifically, we are more consolidated in AWS, and that's where our strategy is today.
Got it. And how is it that you have engineers with you who are doing latest R&D, generative AI coming and all these different things that they want to work on? So how do you handle that when they say, hey, I want to try something, say, which is on Google, and how do you tell the person to move everything to AWS? Do you have to have those conversations where you have to get involved and say, we should look at this, but maybe on AWS?
That's a good question. It's not something that's come up yet in a way that we're really like pitting tools against each other. A lot of our data stuff is in GCP right now. So it's fluid enough that there's options for engineers. And I think that's the vision of leadership, is that we really want autonomous empowered teams who are able to choose the right tools for the job. And then as a platform engineering leader, what I'm doing is looking out for what everyone's doing, looking for opportunities to consolidate things, to implement guidance around things, to implement automation around things, whatever I can do to make people's choices work better for them. And when we're able to package things up and make them a little bit more self-service so teams aren't having to recreate wheels for themselves, we're able to make the easiest thing the best thing for them. So whether we're talking about security, like documentation best practices, we try to package things up in a way that application teams can very easily pick things up and run with them.
So one of the biggest advantage of cloud is the ability to just go pick something up or start something on EC2 or Kubernetes and it can scale. If you go like a decade ago, we would just put infrastructure on on a server, right? And I used to work at a company where we had an AS400. I don't know if you know about an AS400. It's like one of those IBM machines that's really small and it can work forever. So there was an episode when company was moving offices and they had this AS400 machine that was running forever. It was resilient. Nobody knew what to do with that server because if they unplugged it, they didn't know what they would bring down. So there was this situation that we were at where we were thinking about, hey, what's going to happen? What disaster is it going to cause? But we went from that kind of an era to an era where we're talking about cloud infrastructure, deploying things in the cloud, and be able to like scale infrastructure, like click on stuff, have EC2 running, you're good, somebody else manages. Now from there, we have gone to Kubernetes, right, where we are talking about orchestration and folks running infrastructure whenever they want. You don't even have to worry about it going down because it automatically scales up and down. Do your teams have been using these tools now at Estee, applying these principles? Do you get involved in those conversations?
Yeah, and EKS and that space is like very important for us because e-commerce can be very spiky.
Right.
So traditionally you're looking at holiday, so things like Cyber Week and towards the winter holidays, our sales increase a huge amount, like huge amount. But additionally in the TikTok era, you also have to think about things like partnerships and what if Rihanna recommends this certain eyeliner, then what happens and can your website support all those users going and buying the eyeliner?
Right, yeah.
So we think a lot about the TikTok effect and,
Yeah,
and
I mean that's
spiky
crazy. So
workloads.
you're talking about like it's in the financial space. That's the Super Bowl event, right? Like on Super Bowl day, the amount of transactions happening on Venmo is wild. So they have now scaled their platform to consider every day as a possible, Super Bowl event. So for you, that's Black Friday or the holiday season. So that's what your team is working on. So do you have to do like a rigorous testing also? Do you put any practices around testing to make sure this resiliency and scale is kind of you can handle that? Is that something that you do regularly? Do you have practices around that?
Yeah, we have a working group devoted to performance and load testing, so we're consistently making sure that we can accommodate that scale. And it was the same at Etsy as
Right.
well. Before holiday, typically, and a couple times throughout the year, we had scripts we'd run to kind of test everything end to end and be like, okay, what happens if
Right.
we just throw chaos at this system? We as a platform engineering group are able to pave the path of what we hope engineering teams are going to do.
Right.
And we try not to prescribe. We try not to say like, okay, here is the best tool and here's what you're going to use because we said so. We instead evaluate what is probably best for the business from what we understand of the use case and kind of having a vantage point over a variety of different teams and different groups that were working on different problems.
Right.
And we try to package things up and say like, here is this tool. We think it would be great for your use case, and
Yeah.
here's the 10 ways we've made it really easy for you to do so. Here is an engineer who can sit with you and help you implement this particular tool. Here is the documentation that makes this like super easy to implement.
We need documentation. Like,
Yeah, it gets into almost the enablement space.
Yeah.
I want to say we're definitely choosing tools, but teams can absolutely walk their own paths. We're just trying to make certain paths easy to walk
Got it.
and helping teams use tooling and make technology choices that we have recommended.
First of all, when I was walking through your profile, and it's very inspiring where you are right now, what you have become, like as a software engineer, leading a team, now 50 people. If you have to go back to a young Meg and give her any advice, what would that advice look like?
I don't think I would give her any advice. I think that I have been committed to a certain vision from the beginning, which is that I deeply believe that work can be a joyful and contributing part of people's lives.
Right.
And so I have always just been attuned to that vision and looking out for ways that I could lean into that I could work on that. And whether that was hands-on line managing a team and creating joyful environments where we could do really hard things together, but in a really joyful way, or now working with managers and teaching them about some of the concepts of neuro leadership and joy and play and like how people's brains work better and how we can actually improve a company's bottom line by creating these really gorgeous teams where people feel satisfied with the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so all of my career has happened a little bit randomly, but the decisions I've made have always been rooted in that like focus on the vision, and that vision hasn't changed from when I was, working at Victoria's Secret
to
until
learning
now.
how to code, to know where you are. So, and as I was saying before, we were talking about like where you are is the perfect place to be, and it kind of applies, right, in a way. So, when you actually brought this up, this whole idea of neuro leadership, right, and the whole idea that wherever a person is, you have to look at that person, and there is immense potential in a human being, right? And I love your leadership description there and your LinkedIn about too, So how are you applying that? And I know you just brought it up. How do you apply this whole idea to your leadership? How do you apply that philosophy to guide your team into finding the best in engineers and developers so that they can apply all those things in their everyday work?
If I had to boil down how I think about it, or how I've taken what I've learned into one core thing I think about, it is about the importance of the job of a leader in setting containers. So when I think about container, it's like the space that a person inhabits. And if you go all the way back to primal days, we were out in the wilderness and we were looking for ways to set the perimeter so that we had a small space that we needed to pay attention to and look out for danger to protect ourselves and the people that we loved. People were going into caves. They were at a high vantage point where there was less that could attack. That is a baked in brain thing that we do, and that hasn't changed today.
Right.
And when we're working with a team that is also a container about like the potential for threat and reward, essentially. And so I think a lot about how can we set the container to be really specific, intentional, and how can I tell people what to expect so that their brains can quiet down and they can think more effectively.
Right. And engineers are different, interesting people, like if I work for a manager, I convey to them, hey, this is how I work. And he's like, yeah, I work with your kind, that's what feedbacks I get. And I generally used to be an engineer who used to have the tendency to work on a problem, and as soon as that program starts working, I'm like, yes, my work is done. All right, show me the next problem. And we have this natural tendency to work, and we always need great leaders. So I've been inspired by leaders who come in and tell me, hey, that problem's not done yet. Of course, for you have checked that code in, but we still have to make sure that it works, it aligns to the objectives. And there have been many times where I've done stuff, I feel like I have achieved the objective, and my engineering manager comes and says, hey, you know what? You're missing something. So do you get involved in conversations? And these can be hard conversations, but you have to tell them, hey, we need to consider this angle. So how do you take and consider those and kind of guide someone else to do that?
So one of my leadership principles that I do my best to live, I'm by no means perfect at it, is to leave nothing unsaid. So again, when we're thinking about this container, like what's possible within this container, if I have something that I want to say to you, something I'm trying to say to you, something I'm thinking, and I don't quite say it.
Right.
Or if I couch it in this really nice way, I noticed that you did a lot of that project and now you're doing this other thing, and that's cool, but maybe what if we did that? Your brain goes into this place of I'm not quite sure what to do with that information. Your amygdala starts to hijack your brain and you go into this threat
Overthinking
space.
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, of oh God, there's things that need to be fixed and I'm not quite sure what they all are. And so direct feedback and candid conversations, I think there's so much literature out there about structure them in this way and we need to practice it. It's so important, and it is important, but it's also so simple, which is just that I need to say the thing to your face.
Right.
And that's not always easy. That doesn't always feel good, but to say on both sides of the spectrum, maybe it's hey, I think this podcast that you're doing is really great. And the way that you are committed to showing up for it and asking such interesting questions, that's really important. That's really important. And what you're doing, I really appreciate it. And it's great for the team. Thank you.
Right.
That needs to be said just as much as, hey, I noticed you walked away from this project and it wasn't done. And I don't think that's how our team is going to work. Like, we need to keep our commitments in building really reliable things. And if you don't do the testing part, we can't keep that commitment to each other.
Got it.
So can you finish that?
Yeah, and I took it like seriously. I will go and do the testing.
Yeah.
I will go back to the project, Meg. I really that one I really felt. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you're bringing this up. So I know I want to be cognizant of our time, but I also felt like because we are doing a first time in-person podcast, I wanted to change it up a little bit, and I wanted to ask you a would you rather question, or I would say I'll ask a couple of them and you have to answer them really quickly, and the idea is for you to kind of apply your platform engineering skills and your leadership skills. All right, you ready for that?
Let's go.
All right, and if this doesn't work, we'll just ask the production team to like cut all of this out. All right, so here's the first question. Would you rather manage a remote data center with unlimited resources or run a highly efficient cloud with occasional outages?
Occasional outages. I love managing through crisis.
Yeah.
And I love learning from incidents. It's one of the most fun parts of being an engineer. So no question, I'll take an outage here or there.
But do you think, okay, I'm just going to ask a question. Would that affect business, or would your infrastructure?
That wasn't part of the
All
question.
right, I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. All right, next question. Would you rather instantly scale a server capacity or possess a crystal ball for infrastructure trends?
Oh, no, scale.
Scale
Yeah.
server capacity. Okay.
Scale.
Yeah, you're talking like a true platform engineering leader. All right, let's go to the next one. Would you rather migrate to a new cloud provider overnight with zero downtime, or spend millions of dollars to maintain legacy systems?
That's not, okay, you've put me in a really hard place.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah, I know.
Obviously, I have to choose the first one.
Yeah.
Like, no question, someone will fire me if I don't. But also, my favorite project is a migration. Like, I love a big, messy, difficult, like the company thinks it's not possible kind of migration. If anyone has one of those, please call me. This doesn't translate via audio, but I just looked right into the camera. Call me. I'm available for your legacy migrations.
Free consultant to help you with your toughest migrations.
The first one, because no one will trust me if I say the second one.
Yeah. No, we'll come back to that, but
Okay.
that's great. I mean, great responses. 3 on 3, by the way. Okay, fourth one. Would you rather debug a network issue with no documentation, or lead a team through a major system upgrade during a company event?
System upgrade.
System upgrade? Yeah. All right, next one. Would you rather instantly resolve technical issues with a snap, or explain complex infrastructure concepts effortlessly to a non-tech stakeholder?
Oh, I want to explain things effortlessly. That sounds so cool.
Would you rather want to do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in situations where I have to explain non-tech stuff to people, like stakeholders and like general people, and sometimes it's like banging your head on the wall.
Yeah.
But I think you are an engineering leader and you have to do that, so you will say yes to that.
100%.
All right. So what I think I would give you a 5 on 5 on the would you rather questions. They were
God.
great responses. But I do want to go back to the one that you're talking about, especially that migration piece, right? Walk me through that for somebody who's never done a tough migration. How to handle that scenario? Like if you are in a complex migration story, walk us through that.
Yeah, so my biggest migration that I've worked on was at Etsy. I was part of the team who were migrating our data warehouse from on-prem and a particular vendor to a cloud vendor. So different vendors from on-prem to cloud. There was a lot going on, and it was the data warehouse itself, all the data that it held, as well as everything built around that. So the jobs that ran, the pipelines, all of the
ETL
stuff.
pipeline, everything. Yes.
Yeah. And fundamentally, what I believe about doing hard things is that any problem can be broken down enough to make it achievable. So I'm actually working on a book right now. It's called How to Do Anything. So it's
cool.
very much in this space about taking a big thing that feels really hard or impossible and breaking it down in a way that anyone can achieve basically anything, given the right amount of resources, time, and give a damn. And so this project in particular went on for think 15 months.
Wow.
It took a pretty large team. It took some of the smartest people I have ever worked with to come together and to figure it all out, to break it down, to pick up these pieces and glue them back together, to say, okay, we have to do this thing in this order, we have to move these things and then those things, and then to think about the communication strategy.
Right.
And I think the whole thing just fosters such a teamy environment. Like the goal is so clear and so specific.
Yeah.
Like we're here and we need to be over there.
Yeah. And did you go completely to the cloud after that? Like we moved the entire data warehouse from on-prem to, I hope it's an Oracle data warehouse that you moved away from.
It was Vertica,
Oh,
actually.
yeah, that's
I
equally
know.
bad. But yeah, I mean, I love technology that runs on the cloud just by the ability to scale. SaaS products especially, I think my opinion is that of late, there have been lots of companies who are working on building SaaS products. And the advantage that these companies have is that they can single-mindedly focus on building a product that works on any cloud, can scale, is resilient. And sometimes when you're on the cloud, say you're on AWS, and you have just that one product, but you have multiple solutions now that can work on the cloud. So for anybody who's on this journey, this is amazing. I recently spoke to somebody who was telling me like 20 years ago when he needed to solve a problem, he had Oracle or he would have to write his own database. And now the last 20 years, we have so many open source technologies and lots of companies building these amazing products, And now we have database like CockroachDB, which is one of the solutions that engineers and developers can choose from, right? So I think that's really exciting that for engineering managers and engineers and developers, there is a plethora of technology available to be taken and to be applied, right? The one question I was really curious to ask was, if you're creating a leadership culture, you have to you want every individual engineer in your team to be or have some leadership in it. How do you take somebody who's like, hey, I just want to be a developer, check my code in, and turn that person into a leader? What do you tell that person?
My experience has been that I've never found someone who isn't excited to share what they know. And I think there are lots of different ways to, again, set the container for someone that's like, hey, you just built this awesome thing. Like, let's go talk about it to other
Right.
people. Hey, like, I see the way that you're thinking about this problem, and next time I want you to like write that out loud in Slack. I want you to write what you're thinking and walk through your thinking so that you can demonstrate that thinking to other people and level them up too.
Right.
And so I've never found someone who I can't pretty easily invite into building their leadership and growing their influence within the individual team or within a greater organization.
Yeah.
So for a lot of reasons, I think the Mountain Dew stereotypes of engineers are no more, and are in a bright new future.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, if you're in an environment where you have 50 people to manage and all of them are like, hey, I would love to talk about what I just explored, I think you're with a good team. And I think they have a great leader too. So one last advice, because our podcast is being heard in Africa and Australia, which is because people started reaching out to us, I wanted to ask you, what is your advice to folks in these places who are working on they're say developers or platform engineers? What is your one advice to them, or maybe few advices on how to navigate this tech world and what to kind of go to and look to?
I think what's important right now in the current state of the world, which is, we're talking post-COVID, the engineering market is changing a lot.
Yeah.
We're in an economic downturn. There's like a lot going on. And I think what has been important and what is still important is that engineers need to be able to share their ideas, and share their ideas especially in writing. So I think using the tool of writing to clarify your own ideas, to help you understand what's rattling around in there and like really make it make sense. It's been an invaluable part of my own engineering, my own leadership experience, and it's something I recommend to everyone I talk to. Like, write, even if you don't show it to anyone, but like, please show it to someone. But
Right.
think about things and put it into writing, clarify your ideas, put them out into the world. I think it's important, especially in this distributed world that we're living in. So that's my my top advice for people is just write.
Yeah, it's awesome because I read that advice that you written out in 2018. I think you wrote an article, the overwhelming need for learning list, right? And I can
Yes.
see how you have written something 7 years ago, you're still applying in conversation today. So when you were, what you had suggested and what Meg had actually suggested in that particular article that you can go check out on our Medium blog, also on HackerOne, is that you need to have, a list of things that you look at, you see, and you can just put it in a, list of things to learn and have some clarity, write it down, things like that. And I feel like now we don't need a wonder list anymore. There is a tool, I don't know if you know about it, it's called mymind.com. Like, it's a website where you see anything, you can hyperlink it, and AI kind of puts all these things. It's an extension of your mind. So if you're an engineer or a developer or a platform engineer, and if you're in that journey, and you come across certain things, just put them, like Meg said, into a list and just follow them, and keep
You've just
completing that.
up-leveled me. That I'm gonna use that tool.
I'm getting up leveled for the last
Immediately.
50 minutes. So no, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm really excited to kind of follow your career and see how you keep making changes with other companies. It's been a blast talking to you. I hope you've enjoyed your first ever podcast recording. Thank you, Meg, once again, and have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.